So for this next part, I'm not going to be able to look. I'm going to be doing some hands-on demonstrations. For those of you who do have a version of JAWS installed, you'll be able to hopefully follow along. If you don't have JAWS installed, you could always refer back to the slides and go through this. It gives you information on how to use HJPad to get to these sample practice dialogues, which is a great teaching tool for yourselves and also for your students. Andrea, I'm not going to be able to follow the chat for this part. So some common control types, and what I'm talking about here is when you're navigating not only in dialog boxes, but in different application windows, and also of course on web pages, you're going to have different types of controls to interact with. Some of those common controls are radio buttons, edit boxes, so places where you could type, list boxes, or list view. Sliders, so that would be kind of like the slider bar where you would adjust the volume, or another common area could be like I think the volume is probably the best example I could give you. Sometimes those sliders are left, right, sometimes they're up, down, but it doesn't really matter. It's still the same commands to navigate, and I'll talk about that. Buttons, typically a rectangular button, sometimes oval shaped, sometimes square, but those are just basically either press it or you don't. Checkboxes, so checkboxes are each independent. Even though they sound very different, radio buttons and checkboxes often are two controls that people tend to confuse with one another, because when you're hearing with a screen reader, you'll hear checked or not checked when you're in a radio button or checkbox, but they're two very different types of controls. A radio button is like a group of radio stations that you could press one, or a group checkbox, even if they're grouped, where they're related to the same question, each checkbox is like a yes, no, or true, false question. So it's either checked or not checked, and they're all independent of each other. And then a combo box or a drop-down box, and some screen readers call these slightly different things. But a combo box is basically, it's a list, but it's in a box that usually has a drop-down that can be pulled down with the mouse or with keyboard commands. And then there could be combinations. So you could have, often you see an edit box that may be tied to a list, or you may see a combo box that is also an edit box. Usually it's edit box with one of the others. The spin box is, if you're in a place where you're adjusting the printer, usually there's where you could go up, down to make it bigger or smaller. It looks kind of like a combo box, but the arrows go in both directions. And if you have an edit spin box, you could usually either type or use those controls with the arrow keys to adjust. To navigate in dialog boxes and different controls, just tab would move you to the next control, and shift with tab moves backwards. So very simple. When we're in dialog boxes, we use tab to go forward and shift tab to go backwards. If you could understand that, we could really get around any dialog box that comes up, as long as it's accessible. The issue can definitely be if you're working with a dialog box that has some, I think there's some questions there. I'm in dim light. Thank you. I forgot to turn my light back on. Glad I peeked at that. Hopefully that should be better. Sorry about that. So the dialog box activity we're going to go through, we're going to just use an HJPad. I'm going to go through this first, and then I'm going to demonstrate it. So if you have JAWS installed, you could follow along step by step here, and hopefully you'll be able to get to the HJPad sample dialogues. You could do this with or without JAWS on. Andrea, let me know if there's anything I need to address in the chat, okay? So we're going to hit, you don't have to have a screen reader on. If you use a screen reader, you could use JAWS, or you could use another screen reader. For the purpose of what we're doing, it really doesn't matter if you have narrator on or JAWS or NVDA, but we are going to be looking at those HJPad, that HJPad program. So that would come in the JAWS utilities folder. So we're going to hit Windows key to open the start menu. I'm going to go through this first, and then I'll demonstrate it. And then you're going to type the first few letters of the word utilities until you get to the option that says utilities -JAWS, and it would be followed by the number. So if you have JAWS 2020, it would say utilities -2020, 2019, whatever version you have. It doesn't really matter which one you pick. If you have JAWS 10, it's still going to have HJPad. They really haven't made too many changes in it, and you'll still be able to get to those sample dialog boxes. I don't really use HJPad as a word processor with most of my students, but I love these built-in tools because they're great for putting people in a safe dialog box where they're not doing anything and they're just able to not be afraid of making changes to their computer, and they're able to just go in and get comfortable navigating in different types of controls. So once you find utilities, you're going to up and down arrow till you get to utilities dash JAWS followed by the number, and then you're going to hit enter to open it. And then once we have it open, we're going to hit R to focus on run HJPad, and then we're going to hit enter. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to my start menu, I hit Windows, I'm going to type UT, and the first thing that came up is utilities JAWS 2020, so I'm going to hit enter. And Andrea, shout out a screen reader, narrator, NVDA, or JAWS, you pick.
Narrator.
Okay, I'm going to turn on narrator first before I continue. So I'm going to do Control Windows,
narrate,
enter.
Narrate pane.
Okay, so I did Windows, right? I
Start
typed in
window
UT.
T.
I got to utilities JAWS, I hit enter.
Utility.
And then from here, I'm focused on the folder that has my utilities. I'm going to hit R to get to run HJPad.
No next radio button. Image. Name. Explore image. Explore scripts. No next radio button. Size. Name.
Something odd is happening here. Okay.
Exiting narrator.
Narrator is really being odd. Sorry, I'm going to turn on NVDA.
That would be my next one.
ILM off.
Yeah, it seems to think I'm on
Import
a web page.
settings.
All right, so I'm going to hit R. And I'm just hitting R once at a time till I get to run HJPad.
R. Run HJPad 15 of 16.
There it is. I'm going to hit enter.
Document 8.
Okay. Were there any questions? Anyone have trouble with that in the chat?
Menu. Chat.
Not yet.
From Sherry.
All good.
Okay, so I'm in HJPad. Now, this basically looks like a slightly advanced maybe version of WordPad. It's a very, very basic word processor, but I do have a spell checker
tools.
Here. So if you didn't know, this is a fine word processor if someone just needs some very basic tools, and they could save things as .rtf. I don't think you could open doc files in here. I believe it's just RTF. I could be wrong. I'm not certain. But what we're interested in...
Meeting controls row 1 column 2. PowerPoints.
I'm going to come here real quick.
40.
So go to the next slide.
Slide.
So the hands-on dialog boxes.
42.
I'm just going to pull this up so you can see the slides, and then we'll go through it. So from HJPad, we're going to do an Alt-T to go to Tools, and then we're going to down arrow to Sample Dialogs. And when I get to the sample dialogs, I'm going to hit enter, which will open the sub menu. And then we're going to hit enter again to open the first one, which will be single page 1 ... When you're on a menu or a dialog box and you hear ... or some screen readers will read it different, but that lets you know that a dialog box will open. So we're going to look at this.
Document 8.
And I have some additional slides that go over these controls, but I thought this would be a good way for us to look at them and actually see how they work with a screen reader. And I could have a screen magnification program on or some other option, but I think it's good to hear it so you could see what a screen reader would be saying. If you were using JAWS, there's some more advanced tools that I could use with these sample dialogues. I could do insert F1 for JAWS help, the context help, and it will actually give me additional information. So it is pretty cool and useful to use JAWS with these sample dialogues, and you do get some additional benefit out of that.
Spell.
But if you have a JAWS demo, you could still use these with any other screen reader. So I did Alt-T to go to Tools. Let's do that once more since I was talking.
Spell checker.
And I landed on spell checker. I'm going to down arrow to sample dialogs.
Sample dialogs submenu D.
And I heard sample dialogs submenu D. I don't need to hit D, but that's a hotkey. If when you hear that, it just lets me know I could have hit D to get to it, but I'm already on it. So I'm going to hit enter.
Single page 1.
Now I'm going to hit enter here on single page 1, but I have single page 2, multi-page, list view, tree view, and then I could clear the sample. So you're able to go in here and navigate, and then you could clear the sample so you could have the student go through and practice again.
Meeting controls window. Menu.
Yes, HJ Pad, Hunter Joyce. Yes, Janet, you are absolutely correct. Hunter Joyce, those are the two creators of the original version of JAWS. And there's been, oh gosh, so many mergers, haven't there? But they are now Vispero.
From information.
Yes. So Hunter Joyce, amazing programmers, developed JAWS, and yep, they still kept that in there. So that's what HJ stands for.
Zoom.
All right, so we are in personal information 1, and I was doing some stuff there, so we missed what he said. So I'm gonna do an insert tab.
MR. Radio button focus checked.
All right, and what insert tab did, and that's the same command for JAWS and NVDA, it basically repeats my current control. That is not a Windows command. That is specifically to JAWS and NVDA. But with most screen readers, we have commands to kind of hear where I am, and there's different commands to get specific information. But insert tab will repeat the current control. So we heard Mr.
MR. Radio button focus checked.
Okay, so we heard MR, radio button, focus checked. Now, if I was in JAWS, I probably would have heard 1 of 4. Sometimes the terminology, what we hear is a little different. It didn't say Mr., it said MR, but I know that that's Mr., and this is a title. So if I use my arrow keys.
MRS. MS. Miss radio but MR. MRS. MS.
Okay, so I'm able to navigate and go through these options. And it's a radio button. So if you think about a radio station, I could only play one radio station at a time, at least on that single radio. So whichever one I arrow to, I don't have to do anything, I'm focused on it. Now,
meeting control.
We're talking about how things should work and how they do when things are optimal and when programmers don't go outside of the box. Programmers sometimes like to go outside of the box, especially on web pages. So if you have a group of radio buttons in an application and you arrow to something or on a web page and it doesn't select, you probably would need to hit spacebar. When you have these controls on a web page, with most screen readers, we have a different layer of complexity that we have to deal with. With NVDA, it's browse mode on versus not on. With JAWS, we have virtual cursor versus virtual PC cursor versus forms mode. So we would have to make sure we're in forms mode with JAWS. And so you have to use that special mode. So there's just that extra layer of complexity. So I don't recommend teaching these concepts on the web. You want to teach them in a clean, this is a great place to start, and maybe teach them in like the font dialog and other places first so that people are comfortable. And then they could, deal with dialog boxes that have unfamiliar controls or things that are outside of the box and just explain to them that these are how things should work when things are optimal, but sometimes there will be some non-standard control that isn't any that we've talked about, and you might be able to interact with it, or it might be completely inaccessible. So I'm going to leave this, so we're going to
MRS.
We'll leave it at MRS.
Radio button.
I don't have the right option there. So I'm going to hit tab.
First name, edit Alt+N.
Okay, so
blank.
I hit tab and I heard first name, edit, Alt+N. Now that Alt+N is just additional information. If I do Alt+N now, it's not going to do anything. It just keeps me focused on the same control. But often when you're in menus or dialog boxes, there's a hotkey. I see that there's letters visually underlined. So if you remember, like in spell check, there's certain hotkeys that you would want to use in spell check that I could quickly do those hotkeys, and I don't have to tab to those controls. So if there's controls that someone quickly wants to memorize, that they use frequently, that's great. I don't need to memorize these hotkeys because they're not things I'm going to be interacting with all the time. So first name.
RACHAEL.
Okay. So, and I'm going to hit tab to move to the next control.
Last.
Now, if I made a mistake, I could do shift tab.
First name.
And that moves me backwards. So I'm going to tab forward again.
Last name. TYTEL. Trinkowski Sessler.
All right. And.
Street. Edit mul.
And I know this is going to be my real address here. So.
ST.
I usually use
dot.
Mickey Mouse as an example here. So I have 100 Main Street.
City. Combo box collapsed. Edit Alt.
So I heard city combo box. Okay, so now because this is a combo box, what I suggest for combo boxes is to use Alt with down arrow. That forces the box to open. And the reason why I recommend that is if I use just down arrow,
Albany.
what I don't know is, did the box open or not? And it's kind of hit or miss. But if I do an Alt down arrow, it forces the box to open. So now I know I can consistently go down to the right one.
Annapolis, Atlanta, Augusta.
If there is the right one. I don't think my city is going to be in here. This is actually an edit combo box. I don't think we heard that, but I can type or use the combo box feature because it is an edit combo box. But I did Alt down arrow because it forced it to open. So now I know if I did want to, let's say I wanted to pick Baton Rouge, I
Austin,
could go down to it
from Donald Hooks to,
and I would hit enter. Now the reason why I recommend doing Alt down arrow is if I just arrow down
Bismarck,
and I don't know if it opened, I would hit enter here. And that dialog would actually close.
Meeting.
Got a little warning message there. So by doing Alt down arrow, it forces it to open. And then I know I arrow to the right one, or I could use first letter navigation and then hit enter.
First.
It closed the box since I did that. So I'm just going to put
R. Blank. Personal info. N.
Okay. And then
city.
So I'm back to city. Now, this is an edit combo box. My city's not going to be in here, so I'm just going to type
R-G-E.
Margate.
State.
Tab.
Combo box collapsed Alt+A.
Now, this is just a combo box. If I try typing, it's just going to match what I type when I hit F.
F.
But if I hit F again,
F.
There's no other floor, right? I'm not actually typing in this box. It's just doing first letter navigation like we talked about when we were on the desktop. Because this is a combo box, I could do that, or I could do Alt down arrow.
State, Florida. And then I would know, I would hit enter to select it. So combo boxes, just to keep things consistent, I recommend Alt down arrow. Either use arrows or first letter navigation. Florida.
And then enter. And that way you won't accidentally close the dialog box. I'm going to tab again.
Personal information 1 dialog none.
And there's personal information. No, I stopped it. So let's hear what kind of control.
Years of computer experience. Edit focused Alt+Y. Selected 0.
All right. So NVDA didn't tell me. It's actually a spin box. I want you to hear.
Exit.
I'm going to turn JAWS on for a minute just so we could hear that's a spin box. Sometimes you hear different information with the different screen readers. Okay.
JAWS Professional. Document HJPAD. Personal information 1 dialog.
How's that speed for you?
Slower. 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 Slower.
All right.
Years of computer experience. Edit spin box. 0. To set the value, use the arrow keys or type the value. Alt+. Slower. Fast.
Okay, so we heard years of computer experience, edit spin box. Let's hear that once more.
Years of computer experience, edit spin box.
All right, so that tells me it's an edit box, so I could type, or I could use the arrow keys to make a selection. So
1, 2, 1.
I've been using computers since I could talk, so I'm not going to put my
blank.
age. I'm going to say I'm new. I'm 1 year. Now I could also arrow up or down.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so it's a spin box, so basically just very simple, arrow keys. Now I have a slider in the next field.
Rank your computer knowledge, left-right slider, 0%. To increase or decrease, use the arrow keys.
Now, since I have JAWS on, I just want to show you something. So I heard slider, and JAWS actually gave me some additional information. To increase or decrease, I could use the arrow keys. I know because I'm in a slider, I could also do page up or page down, and that will jump me typically about 20% increments. So if I wanted to quickly go over to one direction or the other, I could just use page up or page down, or arrow keys
1%, 0.
are just going to go 1% at a time. Because I'm using JAWS, I want to show you one cool feature. I'm going to do an insert F1, which is the JAWS context sensitive help.
Rank your computer knowledge between 0 and 5, with 0 being none and 5 being advanced. Period.
Okay, so I have some additional help that I could do, and that insert F1 will open context sensitive help for wherever you're focused with JAWS, but specifically in this dialog, it gives me unique help for understanding how to navigate in this dialog box. So, and further on, especially in the multi-page dialog box, it will actually, there's checkboxes to say, do you know how to do this? Do you know how to do this? And if someone doesn't, they can actually do insert F1 and it will tell them what the command is or how to do that particular process. So I use that for students so that they could quiz themselves as they're studying, and it's just a great tool. So insert F1 is JAWS context sensitive help, but specifically in these dialog boxes, it gives information to help them learn how to navigate and get around. So I'm going to hit page down.
20%.
Page up in this case to go up.
40%. 60%. 80%.
Okay, we'll leave it there. And then I'm going to tab.
Word processor checkbox not checked.
Okay. Now, he would have said to check, press spacebar. I hit control, which is your favorite key with the screen reader. That's just to pause the speech. There's, depending on the screen reader you're using, there's not necessarily a magic command to get it to continue, unless you're using a screen reader that, Apple voiceover control would actually continue. A two-finger single tap on iOS devices would pause or resume as long as nothing else happened. I don't have that equivalent with JAWS or NVDA. I would have to know what command I wanted to do to get it to say specific information. So I heard word processor checkbox not checked. He would have said to check, press spacebar. This is a group, but it's each individual checkbox is like a true, false, yes, no question. So
word processor checkbox not checked. To check, press spacebar.
So
Alt plus del.
Yes, I know how to use a word processor, so I'm going to hit space.
Space.
And then I can tab through each of these checkboxes.
Spreadsheet checkbox not checked. To check, press spacebar. Alt.
And then I could check or uncheck.
Space. Check. Space. Not check.
Okay, so I could check or uncheck each of these checkboxes independently of each other. I'm going to keep going I'm going to just keep going past these checkboxes. There's a few more for accounting, database, games, email, and this is just saying, have you used this before?
Accounting, database, games, email, clear form button. To activate, press spacebar.
So buttons are just simple. You either press it or I tab past it. So there's a clear form button. If I were to hit space or enter, it's going to clear the form. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to tab again.
Cancel button.
And if I hit enter, it's going to cancel. I don't want to do that.
OK button.
There's
to
OK button.
OK button. To activate, press spacebar. Space.
Yeah, and
enter.
It's not saving my information, but I don't necessarily need it to. One quick thing I want to show you in here. I'm going to go back to Alt-T. I'm still in HJPAD. And I went down to sample dialogs.
Enter.
So I have single page 2, which is just a slightly different format. The multi-page, there's a list view and a tree view. So there's 5 different sample dialogues you could explore to help students learn all these concepts. But the multi-page
enter. Leave.
Is a multi-page dialog box. So if I needed to get around between those page tabs, I would use Control Tab. So, and that also would work if you're in Chrome or Firefox and you want to go between page tabs that you have open in the browser. So Control Tab would get me to the next page, which is System.
System tab.
And this dialog box is called Tracking My Progress. So as I tab through, it'll say Get Help. That's the first checkbox.
Get Help checkbox not.
This is saying, do you know how to get help? So I would check this. The student would check this if they know how to do that. If not, if I was using JAWS, I could do insert F1.
Help is written in application-specific files. Pressing the function key F1 while in an application will bring up the Windows Help dialog containing help specific to that application.
Okay.
List.
So it gives me specific information. It actually answers the question for me. So if I don't know how to get general help, I just learned that I would just use F1 in an application and it opens up the general Windows Help dialog.
Escape.
The next one.
Open the Start menu check.
So hopefully all of you know that Windows opens the Start menu, but if you didn't, I could do insert F1.
The Start menu is a control of the Windows desktop, which allows you to launch applications or open documents. To open this menu, press one of the Windows logo keys on the Windows keyboard or the key combination Control plus Escape, period.
So if you happen to be on a computer that doesn't have Windows, you can do
Open the start.
Control Escape.
Control Escape. Document 8.
Okay, so this is a good way for students to track their progress, but it's also a great way for them to quiz themselves. So even if they think they know the answer, they could quiz themselves and verify if they're correct.
Escape.
Hopefully that was helpful.
Slide 43.
I'm going to quickly go through some of these slides that just have
slide 44.
Get Joss to stop talking here for just a moment. So back to the slides show. I'm just going to quickly go through some of these because it's going to talk about the same concepts we already went through. But I have just illustrations of combo boxes and all the different dialog box controls and how to navigate within them. So for combo boxes, Alt with down arrow to open, Alt up, arrow up or down to select the item. I have an example from, I believe that's the calendar in Outlook where you're selecting the time for end or start time. And then enter to select an option. So very simple. And that helps that helps the student know whether they need to press enter to select an item or not. It should always be consistent as long as the programmer or web designer followed standard protocols. A spin box, I have an example here of the printer number of copies. One is in the box and you would just use up and down arrow to make a selection. Very basic. A button, space to select a button. Sometimes you might need to hit enter. Some buttons are odd and will work with space. Some will work with enter. Most should work with either. Radio buttons. Again, the best way to remember is to think that you can only listen to one radio station at a time. I do hate when programmers, they really tend to mess up on radio buttons quite often. I have seen where you have a group of radio buttons where you can select two. That is rare and a nightmare because it's really, they should be checkboxes when that happens. But the biggest issue with radio buttons is sometimes arrow keys don't make the selection automatically and you might have to hit space or enter to actually select the item, but usually just arrow keys will select. And think about how many radio stations you can listen to. Only one item can typically be selected at a time. The example I have here is from the settings for Outlook, where you could choose your same settings as your incoming mail server or change it to log in using a specific username and password. And you just use your arrow keys to go up and down. Edit box, just type. This is an example from Outlook from the contact screen where you're creating a new contact. The full name is Mickey Mouse. The company is Disney, job title, CEO. So just edit boxes. And Jaws will say type in text. He says it kind of quick, type in text. You heard it say a little different when I was using NVDA. But if you hear the word edit, it just means you're in a place to type. Space to check or uncheck checkboxes. This is from the font dialog box where you have your effects for strike through, double strike through, superscript, subscript, and so forth. So all of these are, you could check all, you could check two, you could check one. They're all independent, yes, no, true, false questions. List boxes or list view, you use your arrow keys or first letter navigation can usually be used. If you're in a long list and you know the first 2 or 3 letters, if you could type them real quick, like if I'm focused on desktop, a screen that shows folders, desktop, documents, downloads. So if I wanted to quickly go to downloads, I could type DOW. There's not that much in this list, so I probably just hit down arrow to get to it. But if you had a really long list with lots of files and folders, you would just have to type the letters quickly. If I type D, pause, O, it's going to look for something starting with a D, and then it's going to look for something starting with an O. So if you're doing first letter navigation with multiple letters, you have to type them pretty fast. Slider bars, doesn't matter, up, down, left, right, just arrow keys, and it could be arrows. If arrow up goes one direction, arrow down will go the other. If arrow right goes one direction, arrow left will go the other. And then you could also use page up and page down to jump in larger increments, typically about 20%. I have an example of the volume. On Windows, this is an older volume control, but on Windows 10, it's left, right. Again, it doesn't really matter visually. They work the same. Yeah, and the example is just volume control. Pinning to the taskbar. So I promised you this. I have some instructions here on pinning to the taskbar. So if anyone wants to just review how to do that, please refer back to the slides. You would hit the Windows key to go to the start menu, start typing in the first couple letters of the name or document, and then you would use your up and down arrows to focus on it. And then you could go to the context menu using either the applications key or Shift F10. And then you would down arrow to pin to taskbar. So just a few steps, but I have those outlined if you wanted to go back and do that. You could just refer back to this. I have a list of some free technical support resources. These are all free, and there's various ways that you or your students can contact regardless of age or program. Microsoft Disability Answer Desk, there's their phone number, there's a way to chat. You could use Be My Eyes for free to contact Microsoft Disability Answer Desk. They also have options for American Sign Language. Their number is 800-936-5900. Then there's a link here for Apple Accessibility Hotline, and there's different ways to contact them as well, but the number is 877-204-3930. And then I have a link here for Google Disability Support Team. You could chat, email, they have ASL options, and also options to communicate with them through Be My Eyes, which is great when you have those features, because you have a camera and they can see what you're doing. Freedom Scientific and Vispero, you could use Ira, so like Be My Eyes, but you're using Ira, and that would be free for any technical support through Vispero for Vispero products, which includes a lot of brands now since all the mergers. Or you could contact them at 727-803-8600. And then there's so many different manufacturers, but just as an example, I have a link for Humanware tech support, and their number is 800-722-3393. For local resources for tech support, contact your local community rehabilitation programs, your lighthouse, or whatever they're called in your area. Be in touch with them. If you are from a CRP, make sure you're in touch with your local TBIs and so forth, as well as your state agencies and any other, professionals in your area. We want to make sure we have a good team in all of our districts. And that's it for my portion. Thank you so much. I'm open to discussing questions, and just know if you have questions beyond the scope of what we're talking about here, please submit them for our virtual water cooler session tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. So Jill Fluke has a comment. She is on information overload. And so she wanted to know if there were step-by-step lesson plans, guides to use with students on beginning instruction of the various screen readers. I directed her to the AFB using NVDA or getting started with NVDA. And I wasn't sure if you had any other recommendations or curricula that's out there.
There's many different resources. Each of these sessions we're breaking down into small tidbits. I know there's a lot of information here. This session really was focusing more on just basic Windows commands. It really depends on the student. There's certain process. I would definitely recommend getting in touch with your local CRP if a student needs assistance, beyond what you feel comfortable providing, to make sure that they're lined up with an AT specialist, preferably a CADIS if there's one in your area, who can provide training and who's familiar with teaching AT. If not, tons of resources. If they're a JAWS user, NVDA, there's material available for the different screen readers. Feel free to use the information I have here as a guide for some of the basic commands. I hope that's helpful.
We also provided some resources on our Canvas page, Jill. So be sure that you're checking there under assistive technology and in the screen readers page. We have quite a few resources there, Source Up, navigating the internet with JAWS. Hold on one second, Harriet, that I'm surprised that QR code's not working. That's strange. We'll address that.
The QR code was just for the survey. Did we look at the results? I think we looked at the results. It's basically just for the survey. It's not for the survey for continuing education. It was just for that survey that we looked at the beginning of this session for the primary mode of input. And you may not have access to it.
Sorry. We'll get to the closing code in a minute. Is there a major difference between JAWS, NVDA, and Narrator? Is one better than the others? From Megan Lindbergh.
I think, and this is not me, I believe it's Stacy Kelly, and forgive me, Someone's probably gonna say who she wrote the article with, but there was an article that came out recently that verified one screen reader is not enough. You know, there's pros and cons to different screen readers. If you're using NVDA, Kimberly, you're gonna do caps lock or insert with the letter Q. Caps lock or insert with the letter Q. Insert with N would get to the NVDA menu. You can quit it from there, but insert Q or caps lock Q is quicker. So I would say that your student should know at least 2 screen readers. If it's on one operating system, that's fine, but they're probably going to need to know at least 2 operating systems, even if one's Windows or Mac or Chromebook, and the other is Android or iOS. So just keep that in mind. If they're using JAWS or NVDA, Narrator is free, it's built in, so they have access to that. Sometimes the screen reader will work better with different websites or different applications. And if something malfunctions, it's always good to have a backup. The Windows commands, the majority of the commands we talked about, if there was any command that didn't include insert or caps lock, then it's a Windows command. So it doesn't matter what AT software or if there's no AT software, all those commands are the same. The commands and the ways to control the screen readers will be different, but the other commands will be. Someone asked a question there. The screen reader specific commands are different, but the Windows commands are going to be the same. Can you put it back up, please?
Harriet, just wait 1 minute and we'll get to that slide. Thank you.
Okay. Natasha says we have no choice. NVDA is free and JAWS is not. For a lot of people, they can't afford JAWS. JAWS right now is free for anyone for home use. And so is Zoom Text and Fusion, I believe. Through that link that someone shared earlier on through Vispero. That's just for, I believe, the time of this horrible pandemic. But yeah, a screen reader is a screen reader. As long as they're able to access what they need to access, that's the key. So if you have access to NVDA, NVDA has gotten significantly better over the years. In the past, I would say NVDA is just a backup in case you need to turn the computer off. Now it's really functional. You can even navigate on the web. Works great with the Edge browser. As long as your students are learning a screen reader, it's easy to transition and learn a second one. Think about learning that first language, right? The second additional language, then you're able to learn an additional language. Kathy, I was answering a question early on. Insert N and insert Q are NVDA commands. Someone asked how to quit NVDA. They probably had it running, and I answered insert Q or caps lock Q is to quit NVDA. Insert N would be to get to the NVDA menu, and you can quit from there, but it's a few extra steps. Caps lock will also work, yes. Caps lock, it depends on your settings for NVDA, so it depends on how you have your keyboard settings. Either insert, caps lock, or both could be your NVDA key, just with JAWS, same with JAWS.
Super, thank you. Any other questions? Let's see, DBS clients can get free screen readers and Zoom text. They need to contact their DBS counselors and request.
They have to have their case open too.
Good to know.
So if their case is not open, they would have to have it reopened to make that request.
Teresa asked, what grade do you suggest starting screen readers?
How old would their peers be using a computer? My son was using a computer. I mean, I had him on a phone playing around, doing simple games and popping bubbles when he was five months old. So, I think the earlier is better, even if it's just play and they're just using the arrow keys or you're doing that with them. They're not necessarily learning a screen reader. Someone said kindergarten. I would say earlier, if their peers, I won't get into the research studies, but when there's screen time, yes, you want to limit it, but if it's educational and it's active, there's nothing wrong with having younger children have access, and most younger children have access to devices. So there's games that you could put them on and just get them. I've had babies just playing around with a Mountbatten device where they're just banging away at it just to hear the feedback. And their parents are using it more with them, but you could, you want them to have that early access. Absolutely, cause and effect. Yes, Kathy.
Yes, I agree. And I think that too, we, you know, for early intervention specialists, they have braillers in the homes. They're exposing the child to the brailler. Are they brailing anything? No, they're scribbling. They're just hitting the keys on the braille writer. They're getting familiar with it. And similar things need to happen with a keyboard as well. Parents could put the kid on their lap while they're working, maybe not working, maybe just have some separate time. But I think it's really important that that exposure happens at a young age. Kids today are digital natives, and our students deserve that same access and that exposure to grow up with technology.
Yes. You know, I've had kids as young as 6 with some basic, you know, just kind of early touch typing skills. 5, it depends on the child. You know, there's nothing wrong with just getting them on there and just banging away at a keyboard and just typing and just hearing that cause and effect. But for them to really be able to start actually typing and understanding what they're doing, I think 6, 7 is really the earliest you're going to start any kind of fundamental touch typing. But there's games that you could play with 4, 5, 6-year-olds on a computer that, you know, bop it. You know, where they're just using the arrow keys, and you'd be surprised how quickly they would learn those arrow keys just to play a simple game. There's some music games where they're just using 2 arrows. So that's great because they're just getting familiar to cause and effect, and that these 2 keys do these different things.
Absolutely. If you could advance to the next slide, it is 3:29, probably
Yep.
edging up to 3:30. So Harriet, try this QR code now. Hopefully that works for you. The closing code is going to be function. FUNCTION, function, like function key. And if you want to stick around, our raffle is coming up. I believe our next slide actually has the sessions that are still available all tomorrow. Yay. So please join us again tomorrow. Yes.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Someone asked early on, and I'll keep this brief. Someone asked early on about curriculum and kind of pre-scripted lesson plans. There are companies that do that. What I would suggest is I customize all my lessons. So, and even if I have my own lessons that I've customized in task analysis for certain things, for certain students, it varies from student to student. So I would warn you about following any prescribed do this for everybody because things change so fast, and you want to make sure that it's customized based on what commands and procedure works for each student. So I just wanted to add that.
People are saying the QR code didn't work. That's odd. Have to figure that out. Try again. It didn't work for you. Let me try.
We could copy and paste the link.
Yeah, it's opening for me.
Let's see. I'm going to try it.
And here I'm going to copy the link into the chat box. The codes, Lisa, go into the form, the link that we're posting now, or you use this QR code to access it. And I'll be sending out a survey too with the 4 essential questions we have to ask from the FDOE. So please complete that as well, but I'll send that as in a follow-up email.
Yeah, for some reason it's not opening up with my QR code reader. It's not scanning.
Huh. Okay. Well, we will have to figure that out and fix it, but I'll make sure to send out the survey link in the email, and I posted it in the chat box. So you will be able to access it. Just make sure you write down the opening and closing codes. If you have any questions about CEUs, please email me. Then I'm going to promote Sue. It's her time to shine. She's going to be our raffle queen now.
The opening and closing codes are for the survey, for you to complete the survey and get CEUs or credits for being a TBI.
Hello.
Hi, Sue. Thanks for joining us.
My one job. I got to get this right.
All right, so Rachel.
We need a number between 1 and 118.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask. I'm
Lucky
gonna ask
raffle winners.
1 and 118.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna ask Google. Okay, Google, pick a number